Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank the Speaker for granting this important adjournment debate, and I'm grateful to the Minister for her call this morning in advance of this debate. When society was shut down in March, millions of workers were told to work from the safety of their home to protect them from the virus. However, for the prison officers and staff at HMP Frankland and our nation's prisons, this was obviously not possible. Instead, they went into work because it was crucial that prisons remained operational in order to protect the welfare of both prisoners and the broader public. In doing this, prison staff, like all frontline key workers, unquestionably put their health at risk, and their bravery in doing their job should be commended.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I
thank the Honourable Member for giving way. And will she agree with me that the prison officers are to be commended for their dedication, but it's incumbent upon their employers to ensure that the risks of Covid-19 are properly assessed, especially for those in the vulnerable groups?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and of course that is extremely important, and that is one of the issues that I'll be outlining in this debate. It's the selflessness and commitment of prison staff to their work that brings me to the purpose of this debate. In recent weeks, HMP Frankland has experienced an alarming rise in the number of Covid-19 infections. At the peak of the outbreak, around 66 prisoners were confirmed as Covid-19 positive out of a prison population of 850, meaning that around 8% of prisoners are infected. In addition to this, at the peak, around 220 staff were off work, with 73 operational staff Covid-19 positive. I'll give way.
Very grateful for my honourable friend and neighbour to give way, and can I congratulate her on securing this debate. I have a lot of constituents who work in Durham, Low Newton and Franklin prisons, and I pay tribute to the hard work they've done. But would she also agree with me that it's not just the operational staff? That I've had a few cases where the prison service take quite a rigid attitude towards those who are caring for vulnerable people at home, and have not been very flexible in the way in which they've approached some of those cases.
Thank you for that intervention, and my honourable friend is correct, and the discussions I've had with the governor of the prison has shown how dedicated they are to not just the operational staff, but all of the staff and the prisoners and the wider prison community. So in total, with those COVID cases and those isolating, over 20% of all staff employed by the prison were off work at the same time. And it's clear that the number of infections at Frankland reached an alarming level, especially given what we now know about the ease and speed with which the virus spreads. It's therefore not surprising that both Public Health England and the wider prison outbreak control team recommended that HMP Frankland moved from stage 4 restrictions to the most severe stage 5 restrictions in what would have been, in effect, a complete lockdown of the prison. This recommendation was supported by the Prison Officers Association, who are extremely concerned for the welfare of prison staff and prisoners due to the very real fear that the virus was out of control within the prison. However, even though there was strong support for stage 5 restrictions from Public Health England, the outbreak control team and the POA, the Gold Command at HMP Frankland rejected this recommendation and instead reduced the number of prisoners allowed to exercise at any one time and the frequency of exercise, the mandated mask wearing and increased testing. This compromise was then accepted by the outbreak control team. While I recognise that the pressures that the prison leadership are under, as well as the need to balance staff and prisoner safety with the human rights of prisoners, I'm concerned that the Gold Command seemingly rejected the initial advice of public health professionals. So does the Minister agree that local committee concerns should not be overruled by Gold Commands without being discussed at a national level first, especially when supported by Public Health England? At HMP Frankland, I'm happy to say that there is an extremely open and productive relationship between the Prison Officers Association and the prison's leadership, and that this includes daily meetings and a sharing of Public Health England advice to the outbreak control team with POA representatives. However, as I understand it, while Frankland follows best practice on this, prison governors are under no obligation to share advice and recommendations with the POA. As the union is the representative of staff within prisons, this is clearly not right. So does the Minister agree that Gold Command should discuss and divulge all Public Health England advice to and with the Prison Officers Association as the representatives of prison staff? Mr Deputy Speaker, the infection levels amongst staff at HMP Frankland posed two serious problems. The first is with regards to staffing levels as a result of Covid-19 related absences. It's no exaggeration to say that the staffing cover was paper thin due to these absences. HMP Frankland is a high security prison, home to some of the most dangerous prisoners in the country. In such an institution, understaffing poses an unacceptable risk to staff at work, to the protections offered to prisoners and to the general running of the facility. While staffing shortages have not at this stage reached a dangerous level at Frankland, I think we can all agree that genuine threats to staffing levels at any prison must always be taken seriously. The second issue is the threat the virus poses to the health of staff and prisoners. I'm aware that Frankland is a secure environment in which there are already restrictions on prisoners' activities and movement, which can help slow down the spread of the virus. I also appreciate that additional measures were introduced by Gold Command in an effort to avoid a move from Stage 4 restrictions to Stage 5. It's positive news that these measures appear to have had some success, with the number of staff off due to Covid-19 dropping from 220 to 112, while the number of prisoners infected or isolating has dropped significantly. This is a welcome improvement, albeit one that will need to be monitored closely as restrictions are eased in wider society. However, although the decisions to increase Stage 4 restrictions in order to avoid Stage 5 by HMP Frankland Gold Command, they may have lowered the numbers of staff and prisoners who have had to isolate, but it's arguable that a short-term move to Stage 5 would have been at lower risk and would have better protected those in prison, especially as this was the initial advice of the outbreak control team. I know that even temporary Stage 5 restrictions would have been exceptionally tough for prisoners, especially for their mental health. However, I want to be clear that the staff at Frankland are concerned about more than just their own welfare and that of their families. They're also concerned about prisoner safety. No prison officer wants a total lockdown unless it was completely necessary, as they know the impact that this would have upon prisoners. Yet, while the effects of a lockdown would have been harsh, it was arguably necessary to best keep prisoners safe from COVID. I also recognise the argument and understand the concerns that Stage 5 restrictions could lead to prisoner dissent at a level that would pose a different sort of threat to staff. However, there are a number of reasons why I don't believe that on this occasion on its own was an adequate reason to avoid Stage 5 lockdown due to COVID-19. Firstly, there is the fact that many prisoners are just as afraid of the risk of infection as staff are, and that they would understand the need for Stage 5 restrictions if it was needed to protect them from a major COVID-19 outbreak. Secondly, there is the fact that under Stage 4 restrictions, any prisoner who must isolate as a result of possible COVID-19 exposure is losing out on freedoms that other prisoners have through no fault of their own. As a result of this, there is potentially an incentive for prisoners to not report COVID-19 symptoms so that they don't lose their access to exercise, showers and phone calls. If every prisoner is locked down under the same restrictions for a short period to combat a major infection spike, the potential for this is reduced. Finally, there's the argument that a total lockdown could inspire some prisoners to act disruptively, putting the physical safety of staff at risk in a different way. While I know that there will always be a balance between managing the risk of prisoner disruption with the threat from the virus, it's vital that prisoner behaviour does not dictate the decisions decided to protect their welfare as well as the health and safety of staff. So does the Minister agree that the health and safety of staff should not be ignored in favour of prisoner appeasement? It also strikes me that many of the negative implications of Stage 5 restrictions could be resolved if prisoner welfare in general was improved. An example of this at HMP Frankland is the lack of telephone access in cells in comparison to other prisons. Does the Minister agree that telephones in cells would mitigate some of the impact of COVID-19 restrictions on prisoners, and could she update the House on when HMP Frankland can expect to have this facility? The final issue that I'd like to raise is the treatment of prisoners in relation to wider society. While I understand that the leadership at Frankland took the decision to prohibit the use of gym equipment, I've also heard that this is not the case at all prisons in England. At a time when gyms have been closed nationwide due to the government's position that they're not safe to be open, it seems bizarre that gym facilities at some prisons have remained open. So can the Minister confirm that she believes that coronavirus restrictions in prisons should mirror those in wider society? To end, I want to praise the dialogue and the relationship between the governors at HMP Frankland and the POA representatives at the prison. While they might not agree on every issue, it's been stressed to me the strength of their working relationship, and in my opinion it offers a great example to other institutions and employers across the country. I also want to emphasise that while the situation at Frankland is thankfully improving, it's both a reminder that no matter how well an institution responds to COVID-19, there's always room for improvement and lessons to be learned. Above all, we must recognise that there is a human element to these situations and that we cannot just look at them through numbers alone, alarming as they were. Prison officers work in a job where social distancing is often impossible and where the people they work with are not always compliant. This places an incredible level of stress on staff. The prison staff and many of the prisoners at Frankland are afraid of this virus, as they are at every prison. Just like everyone else, they fear getting ill, and the staff are scared of bringing this virus home to their families and to their communities. No one should have to work or live in an environment that's not safe. And while prisons must stay open, no matter the circumstances, the way in which they operate can be altered to keep people safe and to mitigate risks to staff and prisoners. I'm grateful to the Minister for her time and to the honourable members for their interventions, and I hope that important lessons can be learned from this situation. Thank you.